my seeds organised. I've got everything disinfected, cleaned, all my seed trays and propagators. And I'm ready for this year's sowing. So it begins. Okay, here's my setup. I'm on my potting bench, and within that I have this potting deck here, which is fantastic. It's easy to clean. I can move it around, and this one's must be over a decade old. So they're fantastic bits of kit. I've got my seeds all organised into when I'm sowing them. Now I'm actually sowing in February, but some of the items I'll be sowing today, you can obviously start off much earlier. I've got a mask, so that's my mask, and we all probably have those now. And the reason I've got that is that I'm dealing with this, which is vermiculite, which is a natural occurring mineral, and it's heated to a high temperature. And the reason they do that is to produce a sort of lightweight absorbent flake, and it's great for sort of regulation of moisture, minerals, and it's been proven to improve germination in seed. So a great additive to sowing mix. I've got some gloves because today I'll be sowing these seed here, which are chilies, and you do never want to touch chili seed and then touch your face, like your eyes or whatever, rub your eyes, because you'll be in a lot of pain. So that's why I've got the gloves. I've got a little watering can, and then I've got some sprayers. One of the reasons for the sprayers is that when I'm handling the vermiculite, I can spray it to keep it down because I don't want to breathe that in, but also for moistening the compost. The seed tray I'm using for these chilies is just a standard seed tray there, and I've got some really well sieved, through a garden sieve, multi-purpose compost, and this has actually come out really well considering the amount of large organic matter that was in it. I had some very big woody flakes etc in that, but I've sieved them out, put them in a separate tub, and they'll be used in amongst the mix for potting on larger plants. So let's get cracking. I've put my sieved compost into my potting deck here, and I've got my vermiculite, and I'm going to spread that onto the surface here. So let me put on my mask. You can hear my nice muffled voice, and I'm just going to spread that about. On the packets of vermiculite, it normally gives guidance on how much to add to compost for what purpose, but if it doesn't, just through sort of trial and error you'll get there, or you can use my guidance, and I'm going to show you what it should look like when you're done. I'm just mixing it in. It's very much like a sort of cooking task when you're mixing compost. You're just trying to mix the ingredients to the right amount. I always have spare sieved compost in case I've added too much vermiculite or water, and again extra vermiculite if I still need to get it there. That's not far off, you know. Tiny bit more. Yeah, that looks about right to me. Okay, so sort of looking for something like that. This compost is already a bit moist. When I'm sowing in the summer or late spring, I like my compost really wet. But this time of year, I'm a bit more on the dry side, to be honest with you. And that's good. What I'm looking for, and again, you can do this with a watering can, you don't need to use a sprayer. The good thing about this sprayer is that it has like an automatic setting, so I can leave it spraying. Just fold it in on each other. That's probably spot on. I want to feel the sponginess in it, but if I really squeeze it, I don't want the water to drip out in this scenario, which I would normally want for some seeds or late spring, early summer sowing. Okay, let's get the tray. Got a tray here. This is an old tray that I'm reusing because, again, the beauty of, if you do have plastic, you want to keep cleaning it and reusing it to make as little environmental impact as possible. Okay, it's looking about right. You don't need much depth. I've probably done more than I need to. And then you can use a piece of timber or a dedicated tool to firm down. So I've got something like this that I press down, and I'm just gently pressing down just to make sure that my seeds are going to get contact with the compost, and also there's no big air pockets underneath. Another way you can do it is just a tap like that. Right, ready to sow the seed. So what I do now, so I grab my seed, and I'm going to sow some jalapeno. And all the items I'm using, including the seed, I'm going to put links for attached to the video. So if you open up the information tab, you'll be able to find a link to pretty much everything I'm using. There's usually an offer on the links, so you can get a good price, but also it helps the Gardening In Association, because quite often some of those links will pay the Gardening In Association a little bit of money to go towards its good works. So now I need to put on my gloves. let's not mess around. I am a terrible one for rubbing my eyes, so I'm going to make sure I wear gloves. And again, even though I'm wearing gloves, I'll make sure I wash my hands and everything thoroughly afterwards. It's quite a large chili seed, this one. And all I'm doing is just spacing it out on the surface. Again, it's harder to do in big, thick gloves. These are not too bad at all, to be honest with you, the ones I'm using here. And the thing I like about this sort of surface on a glove is that it's easily washed and sterilised. Okay, a few more. And what I'm going to do with these in a moment is I'm going to cover with vermiculite. And the vermiculite is exactly the same as I've used in the mix. Here's a tip: if you ever struggle to actually sow a seed like this, you can open up your packet like this, and you can use anything really. I'm going to use a pair like this, and just, you can tease it out. A good thing to use, which normally you're always going to have, is a plant label. And on the plant labels, again, I'm using a plastic plant label because one I was given them, but also I find actually you can just keep reusing these sort of labels by sanding them down with a piece of sandpaper, and then you just write on them with either a permanent marker or a pencil, and you've got your one labelled there, so you've got it there, and then you can put your date on the back. So I'm just going to check again with my plant label that I'm happy where all the seeds are dispersed. If any are a bit too close, I'll move them around. If any are sitting right in the edge, I can move them in. Very happy with the dispersal there. Move that there. Okay. Now I get my vermiculite back and I put my mask on. And unlike with many other seeds where you put a potting mix back on, I'm putting just vermiculite on, and just to a thin layer. There we go. Brush that gently, careful not to disturb the seed underneath. Okay. And the vermiculite is fantastic when used in this way because the seed gets to the light a lot quicker, hasn't got to fight its way through a load of compost, particularly if you're using a soil-based compost and it's a bit heavy. Warms up quicker, again aiding germination. That's probably about right. I don't want much on there at all. Really, I'm looking just to cover the seed in maybe its same depth again, maybe same depth and a half of the actual depth, you know, sort of depth of the seed. So tiny, tiny amount. Got my label, stick that in. Now what I'm going to do is just mist the top. And the good thing with vermiculite is you can tell the difference between wet and dry. If I try and make a line there, you'll see the difference. Using a sprayer on a fine setting like this, you're not going to disturb the seed. I would never use a watering can to water from above in this situation whenever I've sown a seed. What I can do is place it into a tray and water it. So I usually use grow bag trays, but you can use any sort of tray. Place it in, and then you could actually water into the tray itself. If I do that, you could water in there and it would soak up the moisture. However, I'm confident this is damp enough at the moment for what I want. I'm just looking to get the seed started. So now my options are a few. This is a heated greenhouse, but it's only heated to about 8 degrees. I have the ability to make it warmer, but that would rip through a lot of gas. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a propagating lid on this. A few different propagating lids you can get. I'm just going to use a basic one like this and pop that on the top. That makes it nice and warm. You could go for one which is a bit more sophisticated, which has a little vent, which are really good. I use both types, but just for this one, because of what I'm doing with this next, I'm using this type of propagator lid. You could also just put it in like a plastic bag. So just a clear plastic bag, and that would act a bit like a propagator. But worst comes to the worst, you just sow it into a tray or a pot like this, and you just go with it. Now this is late February, because what I find is ones sown in late February, early March, tend to be less leggy. This now, because the greenhouse is only heated to 8 degrees, which means that the coldest it will get is 8 degrees, but really what it wants is quite a warm temperature, ideally in its 20s, to kickstart the germination. What I'm going to do is put this in whole tray here into the airing cupboard in the house. I could put it on a warm windowsill, but warm windowsills can be deceptive, because actually overnight, particularly when the curtains are closed, the temperature in that little bit of windowsill can be really cold in the winter months. So I'm going to put this into the airing cupboard, and when I start to see the seedlings emerging, I'll then bring it back into the greenhouse, and I'll put it on the top shelf of the greenhouse, because we're not really getting a lot of sunlight. If I show you the top shelf. Okay. So we're not getting a lot of sunlight at the moment, and it's all bubble wrapped, so it's almost working as a bit of screening. So I wouldn't be worried putting them on the top here of them scorching. If I was, I'd just bring them down a shelf. And I'll put them in there. They'll be sitting in a grow bag tray, which will have a little water in it, so they can take up what water they want. And I might increase the temperature a few degrees if it's still a bit cold, but bearing in mind I'm expecting to not bring them out the airing cupboard for a few weeks, so it's going to be in March by then, and it should be okay. When these seedlings come up, what I will do is I will then plant them on into pots. Any sort of pot really, but something like that maybe. And then if I find they need to again, I can plant them into quite a significant and probably their last pot. And I can either grow them in the greenhouse, in the home, or say on a windowsill, or I can grow them outside if the weather's suitable. Now in the southeast of England, as long as I keep it sheltered, they would do quite well in the garden, most chilies and peppers.